The kestrel slid out of jump like a knife through velvet, straight into a kill box. Lances of coherent light stitched the darkness where her hull should have been 10 seconds later, and Commander Maya Rios understood two things at once. The archivist hegemony hadn't come to parley, and the refugee convoy behind her wouldn't survive 30 seconds unless humanity did something very, very human: turn the rules into a lever. Split the signature, Maya said, voice steady, palms damp. Barn swallow pattern. Make us look like 4 destroyers carrying wounded. Aye, Skipper. Lieutenant Parsa's hands flew, blooming decoy ghosts across the battle space. The hegemony's wardens, sleek, glyph-etched crescents, pivoted toward the brighter pane, their doctrine as predictable as a metronome. Protect the record, then the record's carriers, and only then bother with the noisy primitives. The archivists had introduced themselves with edict, not greeting. Submit your histories for curation. Species that refuse are corrected. The first correction had vaporized Epsilon Lyrae's colonial archive vaults. Tonight they had come to Alcyon Gate to remove the rest of us and, perversely, to seize our libraries before the killing. Maya's eyes tracked the convoy. Hospital barges lashed together like rafts at Dunkirk. Little boats, big stakes. History class came back in a flash. Fishing smacks under Luftwaffe glare. A nation saved by stubborn hulls. All power to forward magsails, she said. Trim for flare. Parsa blinked. We're lighting the star? That will roast the station. It'll roast us all if we let them cross the ring. Prep a controlled coronal, tickle local, narrow. We learned to surf wildfires before we learned to read. Today we surf the Sunday. On the hollow, a dozen archivist cutters cut inside the decoy spread. Their formation was perfect, textbook precise, and utterly wrong for what came next. Kestrel's sails unfurled silver veils kissing stellar wind, channeling magnetic anger along a braided lattice, the way Navajo code talkers once braided language. Signal under fire. Meaning that slipped past enemy ears. The star hiccuped, then snarled. A tongue of plasma licked the battle space. Archivist shields were beautiful against it, art wrapped around physics, but beauty doesn't extinguish a forest fire. 3 cutters flickered and went dark. 2 more pinwheeled, their archival pods leaking glowing script that faded into vacuum like snow. Broadcast, Maya said, opening all channels. Archivist forces. This is Commander Maya Rios of the Terran service ship Kestrel. We do not surrender our dead to curators. We do not let strangers weigh our children against your index. Turn away. We will not pursue. The answer arrived in 1,000 voices braided into one. A choir tuned to disdain. Primitive. You mistake resilience for relevance. Memory requires guardians. You are a hazard to yourselves. Compliance preserves you. Defiance erases you. Maya thought of just war theory, a lecture in a cramped academy hall. Last resort, proportionality, discrimination. The archivists were aiming at hospitals. The calculus was brutal and simple. Fire rail batteries only at weapons arcs. Keep civilians clear. Kestrel's slugs stitched holes in the crescent's throats. 2 barges cleared the gate. 3. 4. Skipper, Parsa said softly. They're adapting. Of course they were. Empires always adapt before they listen. The crescents shifted spectrum, drinking the star's tantrum. Vectors tightening. A capital sigil eased into view, its prow carved with a library's litany. The ship's belly opened like a cathedral. Inside, a weapon flowered. Starvale. Maya breathed. Rumor turned real. A field that smeared causal records, turning your past into wet chalk. If they fired that at the ring, the last clean path for the convoy and our story of this moment would both vanish. Orders? Parsa asked. Maya looked at the ring. A lattice of habitats, schools, gardens, blue with life. She looked at the capital sigil, serene in its certainty. In another life she might have become an archivist, categorizing triumphs and sins with gentle hands. But the ethics she lived by had edges. Some things you preserved by refusing to encase them in glass. Arm the starflare, she said, hating it. Localized. We burn our own sky before we let them unwrite our lives. 10-second charge. Weapons replied. Once we push, no takebacks. Maya keyed the convoy. Run. Then she stood very straight, as Midway's pilots must have when they dove through hell, and counted down with the ship that carried her. 3, 2, 1. The capital sigil's flower brightened, and Kestrel lit the Sunday.
The after-action image would be analyzed in classrooms for a century. A blossom of white where the ring's green should be, a wreath of broken crescents, the convoy streaking through like minnows skimming a net's torn edge. We saved most, Parsa said. He didn't say not all. He didn't have to. Terra convened the assembly in a bunker lit like an operating theater. The proposal already had a name the way dangerous ideas often do. Erasure clause. It read like rage but tasted like strategy. We would not exterminate a people. We would dismantle the machinery that made extermination an option. No burning cities. No salted fields. We would target monuments, coercive archives, the algorithms that ranked sentience and decided who got cured and who got corrected. We would preserve raw testimony and living tongues. We would annihilate the sanctimony that weaponized memory against the living. Scorched earth for empire, water for roots, Maya said to the table of admirals and counselors. We take their crown, not their children. Admiral Harlan Brooks' jaw flexed. They aimed Starvale at a hospital ring. And we answered without erasing a single school, Maya shot back. Just war is more than a slogan. Proportionality is a discipline. A refugee delegation waited outside, Yanthai elders with skin like turned oak and eyes that had watched their own stories sanitized to harmless anecdote. They brought us maps, names, frequencies. They brought us grief that asked to be turned into guardrails, not vengeance. The first clause raids felt like surgery. Kestrel micro jumped above an archivist reliquary world. Marines cut through glass canyons veined with light. Engineers seeded viral truth into databases. In a museum's heart where history had been rearranged to make conquest feel like consensus, Maya stood still and read a wall. Every sentence honored the hand that penned it. None named the throat at which that hand had pointed a stylus. She felt cold. Copy everything, she told Parsa. Then take down the story that justifies the knife. We left with drives full of raw testimony and a square of stone from a plaza where the Yanthai had once debated law without a librarian's permit. We didn't torch homes. We didn't mar the school by the tram line. We hid the constellations that taught a child to call obedience wisdom. The archivists answered with something older than law and colder than vacuum. The Oblivion bell tolled. Everywhere our probes slept, footnotes shrank, dates blurred, sources folded in on themselves like origami thrown into a fire. Family trees lost branches, court records lost defendants, crimes mislaid their perpetrators and kept their victims. Counter memes? Brooke asked. Truth weaves, Parsa answered, voice ragged from 20 hours of staring at vanishing ink. We braid witness and physics hash-chain testimony backed by sensor clocks. They can unwrite paper. They can convince a pulsar it never spun. The bell's second toll fell like a hammer. On a street in Jakarta, a mural of a grandmother teaching a child to read slid blank under rain. Maya watched the footage twice and then a third time and felt something essential refuse to bend. There are battles you win by refusing to forget what forgetting costs. An alarm lands the war room. Solnet intercept, comms said, throat tight. Hegemony task force. Causal harpoon riding point. They are not coming to take our books. They are coming to take our before, Parsa whispered. Maya touched the console. Somewhere under the sea, a third grader was taking apart a radio on a kitchen table like she had once done, cheeks smudged with solder, heart loud with the idea that signals could cross darkness to find who needed them. Spin up the net. Call everyone. On the plot, the harpoon glowed like a new star aimed at an old home. Course to intercept, Maya said. The bell tolled a third time. And Earth's sky began to misremember its own constellations. Operation Foxglove launched with the clean inevitability of a theorem. If the harpoon killed what we had been, then the forge that built it had to end. Seraph 9 hung in the violet hush of a small, well-kept star, coils of orbital repositories chained like charms on a bracelet. The hegemony's scriptorian core pulsed beneath a glass sea, where etiquette required you to whisper as you drowned. Micro-jumps in a Fibonacci weave, Maya said. Drones ride the gaps. We paint them with prayers. She didn't believe in capricious gods, but she did believe in the physics of hope, that enough coordinated acts in the same direction make a vector. Kestrel bled a cloud of dust motes that weren't dust, sand grain probes with morsels of AI, names borrowed from code talkers whose voices had once hidden victory in plain speech. Alamo. Cherokee. Navajo. Not tokens teachers. Each mode carried glossaries in a dozen galactic tongues and an ethic encoded alongside, witness first, wound last. We took the outer rings without firing at a single home. Shotguns of M against Guardian drones, medics behind Marines, engineers behind everyone. The scriptorium's entrance felt like a confession booth. Maya stepped through air that smelled like old paper and disinfectant. You could steal anything here, an archivist custodian murmured, old, tired, too brave for a lanyard's authority. You could torch it all. We could, Maya said. We won't. She pointed to a vault labeled with a client species name that had been erased from their own holidays. We're here to give them back what you kept and burn what you made to keep them quiet. The custodian's shoulders slumped, then straightened. Curator Talon, he said, offering the name like a bridge in a dare. I'm tired of filing euphemisms for war. They walked past racks where histories wore obedience like a good coat. Maya's team cracked the Oblivion Bell's seed code, nested symbologies that devoured references and excreted parables. Parsa grafted our truth weave onto the core's clock, every testimony stamped to a pulsar's heartbeat, each heartbeat laminated with a star's neutrino rain. If the bell tolled again, the universe itself would throw a flag. We transmitted the vault's unredacted stories, unpretty truths to client worlds. Civil rights logistics came to mind, church basements and mimeograph machines, routes marked with pi on one corner and a safe bed on the next. Moved memory like water, Maya murmured. Not like a flood. Like irrigation. Alarms flared. The scriptorian core birthed sentinels the size of courthouses. Outside, 3 hegemony cruisers ghosted into existence, plates blazing with legal text that doubled as armor. Kestrel took a hit that threw Maya to one knee. She stood on anger, not adrenaline. Brooke is signaling, comms said. New Directive Legacy 0. The letters hit like a dropped anvil. Legacy 0 meant no reliquaries, no monuments, no songs that remember the Empire as anything but ash. It meant erased so thoroughly that future tyrants have nothing to imitate. It was the clean, cruel logic of a people who had almost been unmade and didn't intend to try that close to the edge again. Parsa's face was pale. Skipper. Maya thought of Stoics and their hard consolations, of proportionality as a habit you didn't abandon when frightened. She looked at Talon, who had chosen a name and an hour to defect. We don't burn witnesses, she said. We burn the cages. Admiral Brooke is on approach, comms warned. He'll execute the order if we refuse. On the plot, Brooke's spearhead parted the dark like a sermon. Inside the scriptorium, the harpoon's blueprint glowed, ready to spawn siblings. Outside, the cruisers rolled to present fresh guns. Maya keyed fleet-wide. Kestrel to human and allied ships, we hold the line between fury and future. Erasure clause stands. Legacy 0 denied. The channel filled with quiet that sounded like teeth set against pressure. And Admiral Brooke, patron of necessary fire, said one word in reply, mutineer. The next 30 minutes braided three inevitabilities. Brooke would carry out Legacy 0 with or without us. The archivists would fire their harpoon unless somebody pulled its teeth, and the bell would toll again unless we found a way to make remembering contagious. Skipper, the cruisers are bracing to ram, Parsa said. Then we change the geometry, Maya answered. All ships, Choir protocol. Choir was an engineering heresy and a political sin. Human hulls and allied craft linking by superconductive tethers into a single singing organism, power pooled, shields phased, intent harmonized. We had built it for siege rescue, not knife fights. We also built fire escapes to be used in fires. Tethers hissed across vacuum. The Yanthai cutter Willowsong locked to Kestrel's port spine. Two free Martian corvettes stitched in starboard. A Keplerite skiff not designed for war, perfect at surviving, it took the aft slot and began to hum, tuning the whole to a key older than fear. The choir ship Aurora Concord woke with a shiver that felt like a choice. Inside the scriptorium, Curator Talon led Maya through a security branch disguised as a theology debate. They wrote policy as liturgy, he muttered. We filed thrones as prayers. People will forgive a lie if it sounds like a hymn, Maya said, thinking of flags wrapped too tight to breathe. They reached the harpoon bay, a spear the size of a cathedral, tipping at a blue dot no one in that room had ever walked. If we sever the quantum lash, Parsa said over bone-prickling static, it can't anchor to souls past. But we need 30 seconds of clean work. Concord can give you 20, Maya said. I'll buy the rest. Outside, Brooke's spearhead arrived, banners of Lorette as warning. Commander Rios, he said on a tight beam. Stand down. This ends with a pyre the galaxy will never forget. That's the point. They will never forget, Maya said. And their children will never forgive. We're not writing a threat, we're writing a treaty that remembers why threats are made. Your restraint gets people killed. So does your certainty? He sighed. I liked you better before ethics became your hobby, Commander. It isn't a hobby, she said. It's the reason we deserve to win. Brooke cut the channel. His ships angled for firing solutions that would turn Seraph 9's sky to glass. The archivist cruisers lit engines to throw themselves at Concord. In the harpoon bay, Parsa's voice was a wire stretched to sing. 20 seconds. Concord moved like a whale refusing a harpoon. Tethers flexed, shields sang, allied crews shouted warnings and jokes and prayers. Maya flashed to Midway again, decoys and timing and impossible luck, and to Selma, where walking in a straight line had been braver than any charge. "Hold," she whispered, face hot with the need to act and the decision to wait. 10. Brooks' guns fired. Concord caught the first volley on a cord that split into harmonics, bleeding heat into tether bundles that smoked like incense. The second volley punched a hole through the Keplerite skiff. Its captain laughed once, bitter and bright, and kept the tune. 5. An archivist cruiser rammed, shedding glyphs like autumn leaves. Concord rolled, took the blow on a shoulder that had been a Yantai mining hull, and answered with a push that broke the cruiser's spine without cracking its lifeboats. 2. Maya saw Brooks' last volley in the weave like a guillotine coming down. Her hands moved before thought. "Concord, open us," she said. The tether lattice rippled. Kestrel detached just enough to take the shot that would have gutted the whole choir. The world went white. When the light thinned, Kestrel still lived and a third of her was gone. "Lash severed," Parsa said, voice shredded to a whisper. "Harpoon can't anchor." Bell signature building, comms croaked. "If it tolls now, the weave might hold." "Might." Brooks' voice returned, low and tired. "You've bought them a chance. Not a future." "Sometimes those are the same thing," Maya said. "Stand down, Admiral. Help us hold the memory." Silence stretched. And then, very quietly, a second fleet slid out of jump on Concord's flank. Client worlds in borrowed hulls, Yantai and Keplerites and quiet species who had prayed for librarians to be kind and learn better. They raised their shields in our key. Brooks' guns stayed dark. The bell tolled. And the universe rang with answers. The choir held, a braided shout against the bell's long hunger, until holding became bleeding and bleeding became music that tasted like iron. In the harpoon bay, Parsa's sleeve was black with solder where a suit seam had split. His eyes were red enough to pass for a hazard light. "We've cut the lash," he said, fingers deep in a nest of light. "But the bell isn't just a weapon. It's a habit. Their networks are tuned to prefer forgetting. Then we teach them a new habit," Maya said. "Curator Talon, where's your route?" He led them through a stairwell whose steps quoted law codes like hymns. "The chorus node," he said, bitterness worn smooth by years. "An index that decides which version of an event is most curatable." He spat the word like it burned. "When you called your protocol a clause, I almost laughed. They call this canonization. We pretend the marginalia never existed." The node room looked like an inside-out planetarium. Globes of light swung on invisible arcs, each an event weighted by citations. The heaviest were lit from below by the same calm, imperial hand. The smallest flickered, home videos in search of an adult to believe them. Parsa began to sweat in earnest. "We can see the counter choir tie each testimony to a natural clock the bell can't argue with. Pulsars. Gamma afterglow. Neonatal neutrino bursts. And when they hit back," asked Gunnery Sergeant Vale, blood crusted where her braid had been singed off. "Then we lean on an old trick," Maya said. "We build a moral infrastructure. We don't just pass truth, We root it. Like the Freedom Riders mapping safe houses. Like the underground press in Prague, Xerox stacked in bathtubs. We make remembering a logistics problem the enemy can solve. Talon stared at her as if seeing the outline of a world that had been taken from him as a child. You intend to preserve the evidence of our crimes while dismantling the ritual that blessed them. You're not the first empire to confuse a filing system with a soul, Maya said. A tremor ran through the node. The Oblivion bell tolled again. On a side screen, two Yanthai elders' wedding footage once full of laughing children lost faces like petals in wind. Parsa's mouth went flat. We need an anchor stronger than clocks, he said. Clocks can drift. People don't forgive. What kind of anchor? Maya asked, though she thought she knew. A pledge, Parsa said. A personal key woven into the cipher, something I won't let go of and the bell can counterfeit. I can tie the entire counter choir to it. But the stronger the anchor, the harsher the price. The system will consume the referent to protect the weave. Vale leaned against the console, breathing hard. In English, elbows. If I use my mother's lullaby, Parsa said softly, no one will ever be able to erase the weave. But I'll never remember the song again. Not the tune, not the words, not that she held me when Dad left. The cipher eats the path by which it can be undone. Maya thought of virtue ethics lectures. Character is what you do when no one grades you, and of Rodriguez-era orders written in a hand that knew love and chose war anyway. She wanted to tell Parsa to find another anchor. She wanted to save him from the small, permanent death of a good memory. She had ordered men and women into fire. Somehow this felt worse. Do it, she said, steady because command demanded it. And I will witness. If the cipher takes your memory, I will be the one who remembers that a lullaby held this fleet together. Parsa nodded once, a hinge articulating duty. He took off one glove, set his bare palm to the node, and sang a tune that was 3 notes if you were indifferent and a world if you had ever been small and frightened and soothed. The node brightened. The globe swung, waiting toward raw footage and unscripted grief. On 1,000 worlds, forgotten birthdays, and suppressed protests and names sanded off monuments flared into being like fireflies refusing a jar. The bell's undertone sharpened into a blade. Skipper, Vale warned. Hegemony reinforcements inbound sigil-class carriers. And Brooks' spearhead is cycling for a total saturate. He's not bluffing this time. Civilian bands? Maya asked. Open and listening, comms said, voice shaking. Skipper, people are sending things. Photos, names, recipes. They are saying, hold this for me. That's how you beat a censor, Talon whispered. You make them chase grocery lists. Parsa, Maya said, heart pounding to the lullaby's echo. How long to lock the weave? 30 seconds, he said. Maybe 20, if. An archivist carrier knifed through Concord's shield like a history that had been true too long to question. Kestrel's hull groaned, alarms yowled like wounded dogs. On the plot, Brooks' targeting solution resolved, 40 lances ready to turn Seraph 9 into a cautionary crater. 15, Parsa said, and his eyes unfocused as the cipher took its due. 10. Maya watched his face as something gentle left it. saw the moment his jaw shifted, seeking a note he could no longer find. He blinked, confused, then set his shoulders. "Weave is binding," he said. "Skipper, what was I humming?" "History," she said. "Keep singing." The bell pealed like a cathedral losing its roof. And Admiral Brooke whispered, "God forgive me," as his guns lit. Concord did not dodge. It leaned, tethers flexing, allied hulls singing a chord that caught Brooke's volley and bled it sideways into a halo of harmless aurora. Half of Willow's song went dark and kept humming anyway. The Keplerite skiff finally failed, its captain's last transmission satisfied. We held a note. "Parsa?" Maya asked, breath a metronome she had to remember to wind. He wiped his eyes with the back of his wrist and looked surprised to find them wet. "Counter choirs live." The bell's erasures are bouncing off star clocks and dying in the weave. But the hegemony just lit palimpsest. Talon swore, a compact word with the weight of a century. "They are not erasing. They are rewriting. Changing names inside living documents. Making your atrocities belong to your neighbors and their charities to your tyrants." Screens fluttered. In one, a protest sign in a Keplerite square spelled out a slogan that now praised the hegemony. In another, an arrest record for a librarian turned into a commendation. "They are poisoning the well," Vale growled. "If we drink fast, we die mad." "We need an immune system," Maya said. "Something that marks forgeries as foreign." Parsa's hands moved with the surety of a craftsman whose apprenticeship had cost him blood. Witness with place. Tie each testimony to the chemical whisper of its own street. A forgery won't smell like the corner where it claims to stand. On the plot, Brooks' formation wheeled for a third pass. He opened a private channel. His face looked older than the orders it contained. "Your restraint buys them time to shoot at you." "Stand off, Commander. I'll finish this." "By salting the earth so nothing can grow," Maya said. "By proving that extinction threats have a price." "Midway didn't end with us burning Tokyo's libraries," she said evenly. "The Marshall Plan proved there's a way to win that doesn't teach your grandchildren to hate you." "You're quoting 20th century pamphlets at a man steering a 29th century war," he said, weary, and cut the line. Alarms overlapped. "Archivist boarding parties in the node," Vale snapped. "Apprentices, kids with training rifles and skin under their nails from turning pages." Talon's mouth twisted. "They recruit out of orphans," corrected Young. Maya remembered Selma again, and a trooper's eyes behind glass. "There were lines you held not because they were safe, but because crossing them made victory unworthy of the name." "Non-lethal where possible," she said. "We keep the apprentices alive and the doctrine that captured them dead." The fight was awful in the way that rooms full of fragile things under gunfire are awful. Shock lances cracked shelves, beanbags thumped, Vale's squad moved like a clinic staff in a hurricane. Talon found a boy huddled under a desk and spoke to him in the quiet dialect of a client world Maya didn't know he knew. The boy lowered his rifle, confused by the possibility of surviving. "Skipper," Parsa said, voice small around a hole we could not fill, "palimpsest is crawling up the weave. I can't keep stamping every forgery. There's too many hands with pens." "We need a minute," Talon said, eyes far away. "Once, when I was small, The entire city went silent for a funeral. No bells. No carts. We could hear our breath. If the galaxy went quiet for 1 minute, no transmissions, no commerce, no broadcast, palimpsest wouldn't have pathways to travel. We could hit the bell with a clean countertone. Maya imagined it, a stillness big enough to hear shame. "You're proposing a general strike of speech," she said. "Across 1,000 worlds we don't control." "Not control," Talon said. "Ask. People know when their names are in danger." "Brooke will never permit it," Vale warned. "He thinks silence is surrender." "Then we don't ask permission," Maya said. "We ask trust." She opened every civilian band at once. "To everyone who can hear my voice," she said, tired to the bone and colder than fear, "this is Commander Maya Rios. The hegemony's bell is rewriting your names. If you can hear me, you know what that means. For 1 minute, we are asking you to be silent. Turn off your transmitters. Pause your markets. Hold your songs in your throats. Let the universe hear itself. We will use that minute to fix your names to your streets forever." Responses cascaded like weather. A miner on Ceres held up a grease-blackened hand and cut his radio. A Yanthi councilwoman killed her feed mid-speech and raised one finger. A Keplerite choir stopped, tears glittering. Somewhere, a pirate cursed and cut power because his sister had been arrested under a name that wasn't hers. "Admiral Brooke is jamming the call," comms warned. "Of course he is," Maya said, and forwarded the plea through 1,000 little channels he couldn't jam because they weren't his to see: hobbyist repeaters, kitchen nets, the gossip wire between dock workers who knew every ship by the sound of its keel. The sort of networks that had once moved boycotts and bus routes and casseroles. The minute began badly, with cheats and noise. And then, because enough people decided the minute was theirs, it began to work. "Now," Parsa said, hands steady over keys he could no longer name as melody. "Now, now, now." Concord poured power into the node. Parsa's counter-choir rose, not as a shout but as a held breath. The bell tolled into a vacuum where its echo could not lie. For a second long enough to fit a future inside, the palimpsest stumbled. "Skipper," Vale said, breath hitching into something like a laugh. "It's working." The floor bucked. A last-ditch hegemony failsafe, the Palatine switch spun up in the core, a spike of energy that would reset the bell to factory cruelty. Talon went white. No time for another pass. Someone has to trip the manual cutoff inside the switch. It's key to a curator's authority. He looked at Maya as if offering up a debt he had been born for. "Curator," she began. He smiled, small and crooked. "Talon. That's my name." He ran. He ran like a file stamped urgent, through heat and quiet and past apprentices who saw his badge and flinched from a man they had been taught was the floor under their feet. Vale cleared his path with the gentleness of a bouncer who had ached into patience. Maya tracked him on a map that twitched with error bars and felt the war shrink until it was the size of one man's choice. "Talon," she said over a channel that didn't have room for anything but truth, "manual cutoff will bite your authority record. You'll lose rank." He laughed once. "I was a curator for other men's lies. Give me a smaller name and a cleaner one." He reached the Palatine chamber, a cathedral of machines muttering to themselves, honeycombed with alcoves for hands. The cutoff sat under an inscription in a language so old it had become decoration. In remembrance, order. He set his palm to the plate. Authorization, the machine asked in a voice that had taught 1,000 children to put their toys away. Talon, he said. Curator, Emeritus. Human category, Witness. Witness is not an authority class, the machine replied. It is today, Talon said, and drove a pry bar into the housing, as if he had been saving it for years. Alarms wailed in 4 honest notes. Kestrel rocked as a carrier tore itself apart trying to turn away from the choir she could not kill. On 1,000 worlds, the minute of silence cracked, people cried, or laughed, or whispered names around kitchen tables like Grace. Parsa's hands moved, tying those whispers to street dust and pulsar heartbeats and a lullaby-shaped hole he could not feel and could not stop honoring. The switch began to turn. And the bell, deprived of echo paths, robbed of authority, confronted with a choir that did not ask permission to sing, shuddered. Brooke came back on the line, raw. Rios. Pull your people. I can finish this. 1 volley. Even you can forgive 1 volley. We don't have afters you can bomb into betters, Maya said. Stand down. Help me catch a man who's about to fall out of history. The Palatine switch completed its quarter turn. The bell collapsed into a tone lower than grief and cleaner than rage, a sound like a ledger closing without any hands pushed under it. In the node, globes of events steadied and brightened. Marge and Alia took their seats at the table. Talon. Maya called. No answer. Visual, Vale said, and her voice did what hard women's voices do when they refuse to break in public. Skipper, cameras show the cutoff. The bar. The handprint. Nobody's there. Parsa stared at a name field that returned null and then a timestamp line he had just written. Manual cutoff tripped by the dash hung like a rope cut clean. That's what the failsafe does, he said hollowly. It requires the curator to authorize erasure of authority. Payment in kind. The system ate the identity that ordered it to stop. Maya felt in her pocket and found the square of plaza stone she had taken from the Yanthai vault. She had pressed it into Talon's hand when he first said his name out loud. She held it now and it wasn't proof of anything except weight. She needed something better. Find me anyone who remembers the man who opened the door for them in a library, she said. A clerk who stamped a pass too slowly. A child who cried at a story and somebody handed them a tissue. She swallowed around a heat that felt like shame's brighter sibling. I will not let a man who broke your bell be a blank space. Across the choir, tiny lights answered. He showed me where the band shelf was. He hid my letter in a dictionary. He misfiled the edict so we had a week to run. The counter choir, built to save a species' names, bent around a single erased person and refused to let go. On the plot, archivist formations began to fray. Doctrines designed to move data more politely than people went brittle without their bell to justify them. Client worlds powered up local nets not for war, but for the awkward business of telling the truth badly and fixing it better in public. The Harpoon's foundries went dark one by one, engineers yelling at each other in the honest way craftsmen do when a bad design finally stops lying. Admiral Brooke is signaling, comms said, and for once the man sounded like a person stripped of theater. Rios. You made your point. No, Maya murmured, watching ships flame and shiver and live, we did. Brooke's face hardened along new lines. Concord, this is Spear Actual. Standing down Legacy 0. Repeating, standing down. We do this your way now. But I'll be damned if I sign my name to Mercy without making sure it doesn't get filed as weakness. You can file it as policy, Maya said. Erasure clause, ratified. Protect the living. Preserve the witness. Dismantle the throne. Deal, he said. Now get out of that core. The foundry's cooking off. You've got 90 seconds. Vale's squad turned on a heel that had learned a dozen evacuations. Parsa keyed the last stitches of the counter-choir with hands that wanted to shake and didn't. Maya tucked the stone into a pocket it didn't fit and ran for a door that opened onto a hall where a boy with a training rifle stood very still and did not shoot. Skipper, Parsa said as the ceiling began to flake fire, what was I humming? You were brave, she said. That's what it sounded like. The foundry braced itself to make a new sky. And Kestrel, missing a third of herself and singing on two good engines, came to get them. The detonation threw glass into the sea like confetti and boiled the water into a white storm that rained itself back down as a baptism humans had not asked for and would spend years learning. Concord rode the shock on a flattened cord and broke apart into her separate ships with a weary grace of a choir dismissed to the pews. Kestrel limped, but she did not bow. The bell is down, Parsa said, as if telling the room that gravity worked again. Harpoon's cold. Palimpsest is failing where we stamped it to the ground. People's names are sticking. Broadcast, Maya said, and opened a channel that felt less like a trumpet and more like a kitchen door propped wide. Archivist vessels, this is Commander Rios. Your weapon is silent. Your doctrine is in question. We are not here to kill your children. We are here to end the habit that let you threaten ours. Stand down. Come help us carry boxes. The first to answer was not a commander but a librarian with ink-stained knuckles who looked like Talon if you squinted through grief. We have apprentices, she said, voice shaking, and we have catalogs, and we have questions we are ready to ask out loud. We will stand down. Others followed, a client council with shame threaded into its flag, a cruiser captain who said he had never liked the way the bell sounded on his teeth, a dozen small stations whose proudest technology had been a card catalog no one had dared to misfile. Surrenders are dull on a plot. They are miracles in a voice. Brooke asked to be patched through. He saluted, crisp as a signed confession. My ships stand down. Legacy 0 is rescinded by order and regret. Clause ratified by Spear. You owed me a victory that didn't require remembering how to be cruel, Rios. You delivered it. Don't make me regret getting old. We all got old today, Maya said, and she didn't mean years. After the surrender came the work that makes the word victory tolerable. Teams in soft boots walked through vaults like doctors, triaging documents that had helped hurt people. The erasure clause became less slogan and more manual, chapter headings like ceasefire with paper, lending without chains, witness protection for facts. Yanthai elders sat with archivist apprentices and traded recipes for index cards and noodles, and somewhere a child learned to tie a double bowline and a footnote with the same hands. A treaty took shape under a council that refused to sit in the same chairs every day. The choir-stead accords did not crown a victor, they defined a job, a plural, open archive that recorded harm without sanctifying it, that honored memory without letting monuments bully the living. The bell's hardware was dismantled and shipped in labeled crates to museums that promised never to exhibit them without the names of those they had bidden carved in stone beside. At a small ceremony on a deck Kestrel had kept in defiance of math, Admiral Brooke leaned on a cane he pretended he didn't own and handed Maya a folded flag. "For stubbornness," he said. "And for teaching an old dog better rules of engagement." Maya accepted it and, because the universe is wide, handed him an index card. On it was written a directive in a hand that had learned scholarship late: protect the living. Preserve the witness. Dismantle the throne. He tucked it into his breast pocket like a medal. Parsa came to stand beside her, eyes clear around a gap that would never close. "I dream about a song I can't sing," he said, not as complaint but as inventory. "It's like running my tongue over a tooth that isn't there." Maya pulled a small recorder from her pocket and pressed play. The counter choir's master key was there, math overlaid on music, but under it, just for a breath, you could hear a kitchen and a kettle and a woman laughing out of frame. Parsa listened, hand to his throat, and then he didn't weep. He stood in the sound and let it change him and did not try to own it. "Thank you," he said. "Not for the song. For the promise that I don't have to have it to keep it safe." They built a wall for names, then refused to call it a wall. It was a garden of plagues, each with a story in small print next to a small plant that needed tending more often than a calendar light. Near the entrance, beneath a simple inscription for the ones the bell tried to swallow, was a shallow alcove. People tucked notes there, to the clerk who misfiled my warrant, to the woman who checked out a banned book twice so I could read it once, to the curator whose name I can't remember, who opened a door. The alcove filled. No one cleaned it. That was the point. Years later, after commissions and elections and the boring work of being good, Kestrel took a last run out past the light pollution where the sky is truer. Maya stood on the bridge she had almost died into and watched the choir's offspring light the lanes, lighthouses built from instruments and vows, blinking in keys tuned to keep liars' teeth from catching. Vale came up beside her, unreadable as ever unless you knew what to read. "You think we did right?" she asked. "I think we didn't make ourselves into people we'd be afraid of," Maya said. "And that's harder than winning a battle. Phrase it like that and they'll put it on a poster. Let them. Posters aren't laws, but sometimes they are the memory of a promise until the law arrives." A child's voice came over internal, the crew's newest, a Yanthai Martian waif who had never known a bell. "Skipper, there's a beacon off our bow. It's pinging in a song." Maya smiled. "Plot it. Listen. If it's a plea, answer. If it's a story, archive. If it's a threat, remind them gently." "Gently?" Vale asked, amused. "Gently first," Maya said. "We've earned the right to try that order." The beacon's light stepped down the spectrum like a careful dancer. Parsa leaned over the console and chuckled under his breath at a melody he could not place and did not need to. Brooke's old spearhead floated in guardian position without bristling. Down on Seraph 9, apprentices stacked newly honest catalogs and argued footnotes with the passionate rudeness of people who intend to tell the truth forever. The stars were cold and loud and very far apart. The choir sang quieter now, not because it had forgotten how to shout, but because it had learned how to make the dark carry words without burning them for fuel. The age of humanity had not crowned itself. It had set to work. Course? Vale asked. Toward the light, Maya said, and the kestrel turned, and in her wake the lighthouses blinked in steady time, a net not thrown to trap, but strong to catch.